This is Ed again in San Diego, and welcome back to Global TV Talk Show. With us today is Hampton Dowling, business executive in the Washington, D.C. area with years of top-level business, and he'll get into that much better than I will. And in the studio also, by way of Zoom, is Ron Cooper, also from the D.C. area. Hampton, please do a brief self-intro.
Well, I was in the Navy for over 20 years, a surface warfare officer, drove ships, amphibious ships in command. I've been in work for defense contractors. I've held different roles in advisory positions in state government, governor appointments.
Right. I
Mostly revolved.
remember when you spoke at my live meetings and in the
Yeah,
Beltway, you were involved with Virginia.
I was the chairman of Virginia's International Trade Committee, and all that's very much in real time today. I mean, logistics and trade and business, it all wraps together. And today I manage my own consultancy and help clients deal with business issues and strategy issues, leadership, and all within the different, market verticals of where I have a background.
So you've recently, follow you on LinkedIn. We're connected.
Yeah.
So recently you've been in Ukraine and Poland and somewhere else. I can't remember.
I just returned from Dubai and Oman,
Oh, there we
and
go.
I was negotiating on behalf of my client certain contracts with uh, state uh, state enterprise energy companies. So it's anytime you have a chance to negotiate on the part of your client, it's an opportunity to kind of pull all of your skill sets together and just hope you win a few times up at bat.
Ron?
I will tell you, Hampton and I share a lot of background. The one major difference is I'm Air Force. I was in the air while
Yeah,
Hampton was on the sea,
that's
and
right.
so that bit of a difference. But point of commonality is military, and I think that has a lot to do with our discipline and those kind of thinking ways. But coaching, helping businesses to achieve their strategic objectives, certainly that's a lot of what we have in common. When certainly we have a lot more in common than we do any differences.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh, by way of audience introduction, my background in the military is limited. During the Vietnam era, I was a medic in the Army Reserve, operating room technician. I didn't spend any time in the battlefield, but I spent a lot of time in hospitals. And I was trained by Harvard Medical School surgeons on how to prepare a sterile tray. But my specialty evolved into patient care and family care, um, being the go-between. And I excelled at that and got recognized. It was a great experience. I learned a
I
lot.
bet it was.
And
Yeah.
it changed my life, being close to life and death and injury and repair. And to this day, I recall and have used some of those skills in emergency situations. One particularly with my better half, Joanne, when she fell out of the car and shattered her ankle into many pieces. And I ripped off the shirt because the bone broke and blood was spraying everywhere. She was crying and screaming. And this is just about 4 years ago. And I ripped off my shirt and made a tourniquet, basically stopped the bleeding from surging, still trickled, called 911, and they fire department ambulance came in seemed like 5 minutes. And
Good.
I'm in downtown San Diego. And they took her, I explained what would happen. They shot her with sedative or something, calmed her down. In 5 minutes, she was in the ambulance shooting down First Avenue to UC Health Hospital. And there she stayed for more than a month and had 4 surgeries. And
Oh my.
yeah,
Mm.
and the ankle and the bones within that area of the foot were shattered so bad. Plus, she's not young anymore, and osteoporosis had weakened everything. And bottom line is that the surgeons figured out how not to amputate that foot
Wow.
and saved it.
Bless her. Wow. It's
And
incredible.
then I became the caregiver 6 months before she could walk again.
Oh my goodness. Incredible.
Yeah. So now everywhere we go, when we travel, I bring my medical kit and just throw it in the suitcase. Haven't needed to use it though, thankfully. Anyway, that's my military experience.
Well, wherever you are, if you hear the words Corpsman up, then your ears will perk up and you'll do something. Yeah.
So, my friends, recently, Hampton, you published some stuff about the Navy shipbuilding and how it ties in perfectly with the economic resurgence that you've been talking about in the past. Would you like to address that?
Well, I mean, you know, the U.S. has gone through a period of general decline. You know, we haven't been manufacturing very much. We've been, as an economy, we've been largely more dependent than independent in terms of manufacturing, the critical materials that are required for manufacturing, the labor skills to support the manufacturing that we need as a nation to produce the different products and services that we, as a nation, the world's largest consumer, consumes. So there's been a transition in the past 2 years or so where public policy has pivoted, and because there's been a recognition of vulnerability because of our general dependence. And one of the market verticals, one of the manufacturing areas where we have been largely dependent has been shipbuilding. I mean, we're a maritime nation. We have 3 coasts. Our territories are all islands. I mean, we're a maritime nation, and when we don't build ships, that makes us largely dependent on other countries, and that affects shipping rates, insurance rates. It affects national security. We really become vulnerable to what the different shifts in public policy and foreign policy around the world. And we found ourselves lately in a position where China is building 80% of the world's ships, of which nearly 100% of our trade relies upon. So, a number of different parties from the defense community, industry, and then the current president has recognized that we need to make an investment in shipbuilding. So there are a number of benefits to that. One, it brings blue-collar, high-skill labor back into the United States. It does it in all states that are on the Great Lakes and on the coastlines and our deeper rivers. They all are involved with shipbuilding. And it also increases manufacturing across the United States for those components that need to be made to outfit ships. And all this it creates a sense of independence. And it's a rebirth of a lot of labor skills that we just have been missing. So you have this section of the economy that produces tens of billions of dollars of cash flow and revenue and investment and reinvestment in capital infrastructure, capital goods, capital machinery, machines and dry docks and so forth. So this really has an opportunity to be one of those components of the economy where the tide raises all boats to some extent. So a lot of foreign countries that have tremendous shipbuilding skill sets that we've lost over time, but they have, Finland, Norway, Korea, Japan, they're all making
France,
hundreds.
yeah,
They're all
yeah,
making
yeah.
hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in the United States in our shipbuilding industry. So in the end, it ends up being a win for everybody. We're using other people's money. We're building up our economy. We're building up our labor force, and we're developing a product, ships, that we can eventually serve our national defense and our commerce.
Right down the street from me here in San Diego Harbor is a shipbuilding section
Mhm,
right adjacent to the Navy base.
mhm,
And BAE has
mhm,
an area,
mhm,
and the rest is General Dynamics units.
mhm.
And they're working full time. They have a few billion in contracts currently.
Well, every city that has a maritime metropolitan area is benefiting and being reintroduced to shipbuilding and ship repair. Yes, you have some smaller yards in San Diego, but most of San Diego is focused on supporting the Navy. But
Mhm.
right now, San Francisco, which is just an enormously beautiful place, it's one of the largest and deepest natural harbors in the world, but it's also probably the most underutilized and underserved large harbors in the world. There just has been no investment. So
So that
now you're
includes
seeing
Oakland, right?
it includes Oakland, absolutely. So I mean, even though there's cranes there and there's container ships, the volume just as simply isn't there. And there's a
Hmm.
variety of reasons for that. So you're seeing shipbuilding and ship repair being introduced into the San Francisco Bay Area, up in the Seattle area. Now you're seeing it go to the Great Lakes. The Gulf Coast is exploding with shipbuilding business.
Hmm.
And now we're seeing it expand into Jacksonville, into the Carolinas. Even New York is experiencing it all the way up into New England. So all of this is benefiting our economy, systems and manufacturing, and from the most basic skills to those that are very refined and specialized for building new technology ships, smart ships, those that are manned and unmanned and that serve a variety of different purposes. So, yeah, what you're experiencing in San Diego, we're going to be experiencing all across the United States, and it's going to take few years for it to really to be fully engaged. But the funding streams are there, the public policy is in place, the inertia is there, and it's just a wonderful thing to see.
I see it right here, and I totally agree and support it 100%. Ron?
I am totally aligned with this general conversation. A lot of this emanates from the executive office, that the priorities that are set forth and the appropriations that are made available. What are our national priorities? And then part of that national priorities are our national security. And frequently, the occupants of or those in elected positions are put there because of whatever the current beliefs are. And I'm an advocate of strong defense for the purpose of defending our country. And when the national will is there to employ those forces, and we do need the right balance of air, sea, land forces, and along with the willingness to employ those forces. And our current president has renamed our Defense Department to a War Department. And for our listeners who are engaged, my personal opinion is that does not mean at all we want to go to war, but rather it does mean we do want to be on the offensive. Then so our resources have to match whatever our strategic objectives are. And when we have the national will to
Right.
employ those forces, I believe that all goes together to have our national security in place. That I'm very grateful. I am not living in a land like we have around various parts of our globe, that we do live in an area where the buildings are still in place. I don't have to walk amongst rubble type thing. So
Mhm.
that can be in a much larger conversation.
So repurposing, reskilling, and upskilling. It's great to see.
We have an enormous amount of infrastructure in the U.S. that's idle. It's not being used. People don't really see it. I mean, as you drive through a lot of our metropolitan areas, you'll see a lot of large buildings, and maybe they look nice. They still keep the sidewalks clean and all that, but they're not being used. Surrounding the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway, we just have tens of miles of infrastructure that serve, manufacturing requirements that are just no longer necessary. And the opportunity to repurpose those and then optimize the waterways of the U.S. and the railways and the highways is enormous. We have more idle infrastructure in the US that can be repurposed than primary infrastructure that exists in most countries. And so when you see the shipbuilding capacity and capability of the United States start to see that reinvestment, and you start to see it grow, that will also improve the urban areas. It'll also attract a lot more businesses to those urban areas that generally surround our harbors. And the increased commerce generates cash flow and generates jobs. It generates a different quality of living. You also have then an entirely broad opening of jobs that haven't existed for 50 or 60 years. So hopefully in San Francisco and Oakland that desperately need to see economic development, and different type of skill sets in San Diego on the Gulf Coast and even in the Carolinas. This is all just one piece of a complete reinvestment in the economy of the United States.
Amen.
Captain, I'm curious, from your perspective, have
Yeah.
we, the United States, insidiously gotten to where we are? And is it just different priorities? In other words, I agree with you that we have a lot of buildings that are not occupied, and we haven't, and I'm thinking the term insidiously, we have lost jobs to being moved outside the United States. Have you seen that as an insidious type of transition, or almost a conscious decision?
Well, it's really both. The foreign policy of some countries has been very smart. They have developed their economy using U.S. dollars and attracting U.S. manufacturing to their shores, where they don't have the labor rates that we have. They don't have the labor force requirements that we do. They don't have the environmental management rules that we have. And there are pluses and minuses to having all those rules and rates in place. But when you're able to manufacture washing machines in China or Vietnam or Korea and ship it back to the United States, and it costs less for US consumers, and there are no tariffs involved, well, then the US manufacturers of washing machines that are manufacturing them in China and those countries, because they're looking after their shareholders, they're going to manufacture everything offshore. So there is an economic choice that's made. Now, is that good for the nation overall? Well, washing machines isn't going to hurt the US economy. But if you take hundreds of thousands of different products that are now manufactured outside the US, then of course it is going to hurt the US economy. And the foreign policy of other countries has taken advantage of that. And we as a country haven't taken charge of our own manufacturing capacity and capability to bring it back to the United States. Now we're seeing that now, and public policy, the current administration has had to create incentives for US companies to come back to the United States. And again, it's all about looking after the shareholders' interests, the value proposition of the country. So businesses look after incentives. I mean, there's patriotism involved, but again, they're in the business of making money. So you have to create an incentive in our US economy for US companies to return to the United States, hire US employees, hopefully not at a wage that really is over the top and puts them in a non-competitive position. So when you hear comments about we need to raise the minimum wage, well, you just have to realize that for every 2 or 3 cents that you raise the minimum wage, there are probably thousands of jobs that leave the United States and return overseas. And, we don't really kind of think about that as a society very much. So yeah, I think it's been a conscious decision by US companies, and there's been some insidious activity that has taken it out of the United States to offshore. It's been bad.
In my perspective of what you're saying is it's a matter of short-term versus long-term thinking, what the impact is from a global and long-term perspective, because I know many people I need what I need right now, and I'm not even thinking long-term,
That's right.
what the global impact is.
Well, our economy used to be the premise of our economy was based on long-term business decisions, long-term investments, reinvestment. Well, technology changes, ideas change, the competitive environment changes. Other countries have become peer competitors in different market verticals. So the business decisions and the horizon of those decisions has collapsed. It's become not 10 years out, not 5 years out, but 3 years, 2 years out. So yeah, it's short-term gain. So I'm going to go make something overseas if I can make it faster and cheaper and still get it on the shelves of Walmart and Best Buy and Food Lion. It's, you know, they're going to do that. So it's difficult, especially when we're in a disposable society. You know, capital goods used to last 20 years. Now you're lucky they last 8. So that also factors into it. So we've been teaching, our universities have been teaching folks to be lawyers instead of, you know, blue collar or, you know, high-end intelligent blue collar workers. So all this kind of meshes together, and it gets very confusing, but we've lost that long-term perspective. So I'm very thankful, as you are, that the current administration has put some incentives in place that the economy can manage, that brings industry from the offshore to nearshore and onshore. And hopefully that continues. And shipbuilding, as Ed introduced, is one primary example of that.
I got another couple of things. First of all, I want the public out there, the audience, to know, because we do have a business audience. Probably 95% is business, and mostly in the U.S., but are really, after the New York, Boston, Washington economic region, in terms of viewership, audience within a business context, number 2 is London Metro. Just to give you an idea, that's huge viewership. They'll all watch the show, I promise you. So
well, I've been in London recently, Ed, and you know, London, as the rest of the UK, you know, it's in bad shape. You know, it's the costs are enormous. The demographics are not favorable to maintaining the rule of law and the business rhythm and business culture of the UK. And you know, when you buy get a cup of coffee and a croissant in the morning, and it costs you 17 pounds, which is a little over $20. Then you realize that, you know, things aren't so bad here, even though our cost of living hasn't necessarily decreased all that much. I don't know how the UK, their economy is very fragile right now. Generally speaking, in terms of the critical minerals for manufacturing, they only have about a 2-week supply of anything to keep their economy going.
so
It's pretty tough.
So Brexit made that, sped it up.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, in my opinion, no. I think Brexit gave them an enormous opportunity, but they have. I mean, it's just interesting that, you know, the party of the majority in Parliament has not optimized the opportunities presented by Brexit. They've been pro-EU. And that's created a lot of internal struggles in the UK. And now you're seeing enormous demonstrations and populist movements that are not supportive of the political party in power, namely the Prime Minister. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all that works out. I mean, just as an example, I think 70% of those polled in the UK do not want digital identification. But yet now that's a public policy that's being implemented. And it's covering a lot of things from immigration to their healthcare system to a lot of manufacturing. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But the UK economy is not in good shape at all right now.
Well, that's interesting. So 2 things. I'd like to have you address and talk about shipbuilding and maritime shipping and transportation issues and security issues, Panama and the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine is alive and well, it seems. And Panama is right in the middle of all that, in my view. And I think you'd agree with that. And the other is the other topic, I'd like to address public-private partnerships. Like, for instance, the U.S. Is taking an investment in like Intel and AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, in return for incentives, I guess, and money. How do you see that?
You're asking Ron or me?
No, both. But Ron, what do you think?
No, I defer to Hampton on this.
Okay.
Well,
Good.
you know, it takes a lot to pivot the U.S. economy from the direction it was going to where we think it's going to be heading. You know, our economy had the highest rate of inflation since the end of World War II. We had more people in the eligible to work in the workforce that chose to not work. And when, you know, just those two elements by themselves creates an economic landscape that is a downward spiral. So to pivot and get the economy going in a different positive direction, a number of things have to take place. And a lot of that is foreign policy. It's ending a lot of the wars, drains a lot of our intellectual and military capacity. You have to sort of shape the environment so that decisions that are domestic in focus, that are centered on our economy, can actually can be effective. So there are a number of tools that are in place that help our economy get back on track, and one of them is the use of public-private partnerships. You've seen the current administration taking a small investment share in our larger capital strategic industries like Intel, you mentioned, and IBM. Those are the companies that have been around for 150 years. They're not going to go anywhere. They have the depth and the capacity to do things that are on a national scale. So yes, part of the incentive of those companies to, again, manufacture and produce in the United States has a lot to do with the U.S. making an investment in that company. Not a large investment where we influence their business decisions and contracts, but it's an element of stability that we as a country support them and want them here. So you see a lot of the Fortune 50 and Fortune 250 companies getting different levels of investment by the United States for incentive, for stability. A lot of that investment is to help them educate the public to be able to be employed by those companies.
So workforce training,
Yeah,
which is
a lot of
really
this,
helpful to
yeah,
the
absolutely.
labor
We're having to
force.
do so many things at the same time to get our economy back in place. And our unions are not always behind these efforts because one, unions have a role. Unions were created for a purpose. Some of those, the reasons for unions existing is fleeting. It's kind of fading, and typically union pay scales are pretty large. They are infinitely larger than most other countries, which is one of the reasons we've shifted manufacturing offshore. So the administration's had to work with unions. It's had to work with the larger Fortune 250 companies that employ so many people. He's had to engage the small business community that produces 75% of all of our revenue in the United States. And all this in parallel with shifting our foreign policy. So public-private partnerships, government investment at a low level, and creating economic incentives for companies to work and invest here is huge. And it's all being done at the same time. And that's why you see so many of these executive orders and legislation coming out that's boom, boom, boom. It's at a fire hose pace. Because if we don't do it now, we're going to find ourselves in a position where we are not going to be able to compete and will be vulnerable with certain countries outside.
Well said, my friend. Would you like to address Panama?
Well, I mean, Panama, I mean, it's a strategic country, and it's a strategic, unique, singular capability in the world. There's no other canal like the Panama Canal. And if you'll remember, the very first mission of our Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio, was to Panama. The first place the Secretary of Defense at the time, Secretary of War, went was Panama. The first place the Secretary of the Treasury went was Panama. First place the Secretary of Transportation went was Panama. So why Panama? Well, I'm very familiar with Panama, and the influence of China was becoming extraordinary, to the point where a lot of the signs in the Panama Canal Authority were written in Chinese. And there's a lot of intelligence, industrial intelligence and espionage going on in the cargo terminals in the canal area. So it was becoming quite noticeable. And it happens. It's business. It's cash flow. The Panama Canal was going through a period where, because of drought and periods of dryness, lowered the level of the Panama Canal. Business wasn't as good. I mean, there are a number of competing factors that allowed the influence of China to rise at a very rapid rate over a very short period of time. And that became a strategic problem for the United States. We need to make sure that that canal stays free and open for all nations, but certainly for the United States, should we need to access that in time of war. Because again, we have an Atlantic, we have a Pacific, we need to have that area. And the Arctic is just now opening up for a finite period of time, as it does periodically through world history. But that's not always going to be in place. So Panama is a friend of the United States. We have a tremendous investment in the United States. The operation of the canal is going to be turned over to a consortium that has yet to be finalized, but it is most of it, the majority of which is going to be U.S. commercial interests.
I remember, well, in 2006, I was invited to produce one of my live conferences in Panama with one of the locally owned shipping companies. And the family also owned a relocation management company, and other relatives were involved in at the time, the Panama government. And the event that I was allowed to produce brought together sponsors and corporate and PwC, Pricewaterhouse, became the top sponsor. And they really liked what I did, and then they invited me to bring my conference to Brazil.
Oh,
and I did several there in the early part of this century. Well, for 10 years. But so I'm knowledgeable about that area, of course, but it's fascinating. I really enjoyed Panama. We produced that conference in 2006 on or about February 1, and most of my customers came in from the New York, Boston, and Washington area, and the snowstorm hit the Northeast, and everybody had to stay in Panama an extra 4 or 5 days, and nobody minded.
Yeah, Ed, I'll interject just very briefly here. I think everything we're addressing has to do with long-term strategic thinking and our vulnerabilities. And as we are able to think into our vulnerabilities, of course, manufacturing, access to strategic minerals, all of these kinds of things, we have got to keep all of this together from a very global perspective. And I'm certainly an advocate of negotiating and wanting to try to have friendly relationships with, but we do have adversaries or opponents whose values do not necessarily align with ours. And so I do believe, and I'm not trying to make a political statement of America first, but as we do align with that basic philosophy, then as America becomes first, as our economy grows, virtually everyone around the globe benefits from that. And so that is the strategic vision, or let's say the strategic mindset, maybe a better term, that I have, and I sense Hampton has the same thing. And we're looking out for the greater good of the long range of the approaches that we take.
I really appreciate you guys coming on the program and teaching. And
Well,
I'm
Ed,
glad to do that.
you mentioned the Monroe Doctrine. That's still kind of alive and well. Right now, and we have for about 2 months, we've had a maritime task force off of Venezuela and in the Southern Caribbean. So, I mean, why is that? Well, I mean, we've closed the border to illegal immigration, and we've cut down a lot on the flow of drugs and weapons going into the United States. But the offshore capability of these cartels to ship drugs into the United States across, deep blue water transit lanes is enormous. I mean, they have submarines, they have ships. They're very good. I mean, these cartels are tens of billions of dollars of deep pockets that can afford the technology and the resources to bring drugs into the U.S. and Canada, and then also send these drugs from Colombia, Central America, and Venezuela all the way across the Atlantic into Africa that goes up into Europe and into Russia.
So you
And
mentioned submarines. I was reading that the Coast Guard, which is here right down the street here in the San Diego Harbor, they found these mysterious submarines unmanned
That's right.
and full of drugs.
That's right. And you also have to know that, let's just say we capture 3 submarines that are full of cocaine. 15 others have made it to the United States. So this is what the ocean's a big place. And so the U.S. Navy task force with a couple of Coast Guard cutters, we're trying to cut it off as it leads Colombia. The president of Colombia is not pro-American. He's not pro-West. He's not popular in his own citizens, and some of the people in his own administration have tried to remove him. So we don't have a friend in Colombia right now, and a lot of the flow of drugs is coming out of Colombia. Venezuela well, we all know about Venezuela, but there's another reason why our task force is off of Venezuela. People don't really, it hasn't even been in the news very much, but Venezuela has been very mobile on the defense of their neighboring country, Guyana, Guyana. And so Guyana has one of the largest offshore oil reserves in the world. And Venezuela has had border disputes and conflict with Guyana's military for the past 2 or 3 years. We have a number of U.S. military advisors there, but the Chinese are also very interested in acquiring the oil rights off of Guyana, and they can only do that if Venezuela occupies that territory. So part of the reason we have 2,000 Marines embarked on amphibious ships is so that if we have to protect Guyana, we're there to do that. So there's a lot more going on that relates to the Monroe Doctrine, even helping bolster the economy of Argentina and trying to influence what's going on in Peru. Enormous investment in Peru by China. They are building out one of the largest container ports in the world in Lima, just outside Lima, Peru. Well, I mean, all that's being done because the U.S. hasn't shown any interest in South America for a while. So we're having to make some investments, all of which, I mean, this is all foreign policy related, but it affects the flow of drugs, cash, weapons, commerce, manufactured goods, our free trade agreements, and all that makes a difference on the value of our dollar, what we manufacture in the U.S., what we export from the U.S. So again, how we pivot to make the U.S. domestic economy resilient has a lot to do with what we're doing in terms of foreign policy.
Right.
I am right on target with everything, and meaning that, yes, the Chinese are having a greater influence in many places around the globe. And we have to care about what's happening. And is all of that within our global strategic interest? And that is everything about long-range strategic thinking that where we have to be ready to respond and not just wish things weren't happening, but it does require the resources to engage.
Please come back on the show for another edition, keeping me and the audience informed.
Ed, you need to invite us to San Diego. We need to do this around the same table, you know, maybe on the waterfront or something. I mean, we're waiting for this.
I am going to send out an invitation.
Okay, all right. Good seeing you, Ron.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Okay. Be back soon.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.